We got a couple things we need to talk about. The president said some amazing things over in Africa, and I don't know how he's getting away with it. When he went over to Africa, did anybody see some of the things that he actually said, and especially about us, where he talked about?
Are you talking about his press?
No. Before that, he also talked about be wary of foreign powers, even the United States. So he's telling people, you can't even trust us, which that's the most accurate thing he has said. But what president says that? Don't even trust us. Then, during a press conference with Jacob Zuma, he's South Africa, he says, he calls the press pool my press. And he says, my press just tried to squeeze 3 or 4 questions in there. And he berates his press because the South African press was not doing that. They would ask one question. And he said, my press just better behave. Excuse me? My press just better behave? And you see that they are behaving because you're not seeing that story anywhere. Since when does the president say something like that with cameras rolling and you don't have it reported anywhere?
And there's no audio to be found on that either.
Can't find it.
Can't find a single sound bite.
If anybody has it, if anybody can find it, please send it to Pat.
Yeah.
But we can't find it anywhere. Now, here's the other thing that he said. He came out this weekend and he said, you know what? Please, everybody just needs to settle down. Quote, I am not going to force churches to marry homosexual couples.
Oh, thank you. Your Highness.
Let me say it again. Jeez. Quote, I'm not going to force churches to marry homosexual couples, end quote. Since when have you ever heard any president say, I'm not going to force people? He'll say, we're not going to, the laws are not going to. He's saying, I will not force. Now, I want churches to understand, this is coming from a man who 18 months ago started to evolve on this issue. We all know he didn't evolve. We all know that's exactly his opinion the whole time. What he has his opinion now on gay marriage was his opinion 18 months ago. He was lying 18 months ago. He didn't evolve. He was lying. And everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Now, is he lying now to the churches? Or will he evolve more? Or will he stay true to that? I don't know. But once you've lied to me once, how am I supposed to trust you? You looked me in the face and told me, no, look, I don't think that, that gay marriage, the Defense of Marriage Act is fine. We're not going to do that. There's some things that we need to talk about, off the side, make sure that, couples have their own rights and they can, they're not going to get penalized because they're not married, blah, blah, blah. All stuff we agree on. But he's not for going against the Defense of Marriage Act. And then 18 months later, he says it's a grand victory. And then that weekend, he says, I'm not going to force. I warn you, this is exactly what happened in Germany. The Fuhrer came out and everybody said he was a big Christian. He wasn't a Christian. He campaigned. I saw footage about 2 years ago of Adolf Hitler that I have never seen before. And people say he was a big Christian. He was a big Christian. No, but that is how he campaigned. Before he became the chancellor, he campaigned exactly that way. And he was saying, I'm there for Jesus and blah, blah, blah. And everybody bought it. And he was not there for Jesus. Then he started messing with the churches and telling them what they had.
Quite the opposite, right? He had a real animosity for Christianity. Hated Christians.
He hated Christians.
Yeah.
But he imaged himself coming in as a Christian. Then he started nibbling around the edges of the churches. The churches said, oh, don't worry about it. Because the Fuhrer said, I am not going to force churches to do X, Y, and Z. Within 5 years, they had removed all of the crucifixes and the pictures of Christ, and they were replaced. The altars were required to have a picture of the Fuhrer. But the good thing is, here, nobody thinks that this guy, our president, is a god. Nobody thinks that he's a god or has kind of, godlike powers.
I don't know if you could say...
At least no members of the press.
Nobody. I'm not sure if you can...
I mean, in a way, Obama's standing above the country, above the world. He's sort of God. He's
Let me... By the way, on the...
editor of Newsweek, by the way.
On the back to the press, him telling the press they need to behave, there is a Dick Durbin editorial that came out this weekend. Dick Durbin, it's time to say who's a real reporter. And what he's saying is, these blog sites, you're not journalists, and you should have absolutely no protection. You're not journalists. We know who the real journalists are. They're the ones who go to school. They're the ones who go to the big established media operations. And the government now needs to say who's a journalist and who's not a journalist. So we'll know who the real journalists are, and we'll be able to protect the real journalists and get the fake journalists. I'm telling you, media,
wow, that's danger.
You better not behave because your time is limited. Look at the signs. He's intimidating you through the AP scandal. He's intimidating you and listening to you through the Fox scandal. And nobody's doing anything about it. He then chastises them and says, you better behave. Then Dick Durbin says, by the way, it's going to get ugly for anybody we choose that they're not a journalist. If we say you're not a journalist, it's going to get ugly for them. In other words, behave, because we're about to reward our friends and punish our enemies. Gee, where have I heard reward our friends and punish our enemies? Oh, I remember on the campaign trail. That's what the president said.
No, he would never say something like what you're saying. Can't imagine.
Pretty sure he did. I
can't imagine
I'm positive that
he would ever say.
But they're going to be paying attention to this election. And if Latinos sit out the election, instead of saying we're going to punish our enemies and we're going to reward our friends who stand with us on issues that are important to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Here's one last thing in this rant. There is a German psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. He lives in Illinois. Holocaust survivor. Jewish guy. He says very few people in Germany were Nazis, but many enjoyed the return of German pride, and many more were too busy to care. May I ask, is that you at this point? I was one of those who thought the Nazis were just a bunch of fools. So the majority just sat back and just let it happen. Then, before we knew it, they owned us. We had lost control, and the end of the world had come. My family lost everything. I ended up in a concentration camp. We are told again and again by the experts and the talking heads that Islam is the religion of peace, and the vast majority of Muslims just want to live in peace. Although this unqualified assertion might be true, it is entirely irrelevant. Now, I say this about the people who are in the universities, the people who are in the White House, the people who are in Congress, the Bill Ayers of the world. You can talk about Islam, Nazis, or radicals from the 1960s. Listen carefully to his point. We're told again by the experts, talking heads, the religion of peace. Vast majority want to live in peace. It might be true, but it's entirely irrelevant. It's meaningless fluff meant to make us feel better, meant to somehow diminish the specter of the fanatics rampaging across the globe. The fact is that fanatics rule Islam at this moment in history. It is the fanatics who march. It is the fanatics who wage war on any of the 50 shooting wars worldwide. Again, take this out of Islam and just make it, who's in the streets? Who are in the streets of our own countries? Our own country, who are the ones that are pushing this? The radical agenda. They are the radicals. They're not the average person. The Tea Party is the average person, but even that, not really. That's the 10%, 20% who says, over my dead body, the Constitution now and forever. Even the Tea Party are the radicals of the Constitution. They're the radical Americans marching against the radicals on the left. It's the fanatics that march. The fanatics who systematically slaughter Christians or tribal groups throughout Africa and are gradually taking over the entire continent in an Islamic wave. It is the fanatics who bomb, behead, murder, and honor kill. It's the fanatics who take over mosque after mosque. It is the fanatics who zealously spread the stoning and hanging of rape victims. It is the zealot that stone homosexuals. It is the fanatic and zealot who teach their young to kill and to become suicide bombers. The hard, quantifiable fact is that the peaceful majority, the silent majority, is cowed and extraneous. Communist Russia was comprised of Russians who just wanted to live in peace. Yet the Russian communists were responsible for the murder of 20 million people. The peaceful majority are irrelevant. China's huge population was peaceful as well, but the Chinese communists managed to kill a staggering 70 million people. The average Japanese individual prior to World War II was not a warmongering sadist, yet Japan murdered and slaughtered its way across Southeast Asia in an orgy of killing that included the systematic murder of 12 million Chinese civilians, most killed by a sword, a shovel, and a bayonet. And who can forget Rwanda, which collapsed into butchery? Could it not be said that the majority of Rwandans are peace-loving? History lessons are incredibly simple and blunt. Yet for all of our powers of reason, we miss often the most basic, uncomplicated point. Peace-loving Muslims have been made irrelevant by their silence. Peace-loving Muslims will become our enemy if they don't speak up. Because like my friend from Germany, they will awaken one day. They will find that fanatics own them. At the end of the world has begun. Peace-loving Germans, Japanese, Chinese, Russians, Rwandans, Serbs, Afghans, Iraqis, Palestinians, Somalis, Nigerians, Algerians, and many others have died because the peaceful majority did not speak up until it was too late. I would like to make the point the same thing could be said about Martin Luther King. The peace-loving majority of this country never stood up. Now Islamic prayers have been introduced in Toronto and other public schools, in Ottawa, Ontario, and the Lord's Prayer is being removed. In Australia, indeed many countries and around the world, many of the most commonly consumed food items have the halal emblem on them. Look on the back of some of the most popular chocolate bars and other food items at your local supermarket. Food on aircraft have the halal emblem, just to appease the privileged minority who are now rapidly expanding within our nation's shores. In the UK, the Muslim countries refuse to integrate. And so now dozens of no-go zones with major cities across the country where the police force dare not intrude. Sharia law prevails there because the Muslim community in those areas refuse to acknowledge British law. For all of us who watch it all and watch it all unfold, we must pay attention to the only group that counts, the fanatics that challenge and threaten our way of life. And we are silent once again. Worth reading, I thought. We are not angry. We are not haters. We are not racist. But we must be silent no more. Not another day.